Trump's sanctions hurricane, Putin on the verge of total collapse, a Turkish diplomatic explosion, Zelensky and Whitcoff preparing a shocking decision, Erdogan rejoices, Russia under immense pressure, China brings the Kremlin to its knees, the world holds its breath. What happens next? I'll tell you all the details in just a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. There will be no peace without Turkey. Erdogan has challenged both the West and the Kremlin at the same time. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the U.S. President's Special Representative Steve Whitcoff will hold talks in Turkey. This was reported by Reuters journalist Ahmed Rashid. I quote, U.S. Special Representative Steve Whitcoff will visit Turkey on Wednesday and join the scheduled talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, a Turkish source reported on Tuesday. Earlier, Zelensky announced that he would travel to Turkey tomorrow to intensify negotiations, present solutions developed with partners, and also to resume the exchange of prisoners of war.
Tomorrow there will be a meeting in Turkey. We are preparing to intensify negotiations, and we have developed solutions that we will propose to our partners. All efforts are aimed at bringing the war to an end. This is Ukraine's top priority. We are also working to resume the exchange and return of prisoners.
Moscow has already responded. The Kremlin says that dictator Putin is supposedly open to negotiations. This was stated by the spokesperson for the Russian president, Dmitry Peskov. According to him, apparently Moscow has not received any information from Kiev about an intention to resume negotiations. However, he says the Kremlin will wait for the results of the meeting between Zelensky and Whitcoff. Moscow's position, Peskov boldly emphasized, is well known in Washington, Istanbul, and Kiev. Moreover, Trump has given the green light to new sanctions against the Russian Federation. Congress is beginning its work. The new sanctions are intended to increase pressure on Putin in order to end the war in Ukraine. With the approval of U.S. President Donald Trump, Congress is moving to consider a bipartisan bill on additional sanctions against Russia, said U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham. According to him, they will give Trump more tools to stop the bloodshed in Ukraine.
The bill allows the U.S. president, at his own discretion, to impose secondary sanctions and tariffs against countries that continue to buy cheap Russian oil and gas, thereby supporting Putin's war machine.
Graham added that the bill would give the American leader more flexibility and authority to push the Kremlin dictator toward peace talks by putting pressure not only on Russia, but also on countries like Iran, for example, which supports Putin's regime. Notably, U.S. President Donald Trump is ready to sign a bill on secondary sanctions against Russia, provided he retains the right to make the final decision regarding any restrictions. This was reported by Reuters, citing a senior White House official. According to him, the White House will insist on guarantees that the U.S. president will retain control over the sanctions.
For the White House and the president, it has always been important that the sanctions package includes a provision guaranteeing the president the right to make the final decisions on them. Therefore, if such a clause is included, I think the president will consider signing the bill.
He did not provide any further details. The White House representative also added that the Trump administration continues to negotiate with Russia on ending the war in Ukraine. Let me remind you that the bipartisan bill on secondary sanctions against Russia, authored by Republican Lindsey Graham and Democrat Richard Blumenthal, was introduced in the spring of 2025. It provides for tariffs of 500% on imports from countries that purchase Russian oil and gas. Refusing to meet with Putin in Budapest, imposing sanctions, and even possibly allowing the use of long-range weapons deep inside Russia, Donald Trump has become seriously angry with the Kremlin dictator. How will these recent developments affect Russia and Ukraine, and does the United States truly play the key role? Find out more in the following report.
The cancellation of the meeting in Budapest, the green light for strikes with long-range British and French missiles on Russian territory, and sanctions against the two largest oil companies of the gas station country. Donald Trump has finally seen the light and decided to crush Putin. What is really happening in the White House?
I've always felt that Putin wants everything, not just a part. I think now he's ready to negotiate. We don't want him to get everything.
As soon as the green light was given from the Oval Office, the U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations also sprang into action. There, they supported 3 legislative initiatives aimed against Russia, which started the war in Ukraine. Among other things, this includes recognizing the Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism and the use of frozen assets. However, the Senate itself admits that it's not possible to vote on these bills due to the government shutdown. Nevertheless, in just one day, it seems that across the ocean, attitudes have shifted toward Ukraine and have turned their backs on Putin. But as analysts point out, it's too early to award Trump the Hero's Medal. Donald, as before, doesn't want Ukraine to win. He just wants everything to end as soon as possible along the current lines, to pin the badge of a great peacemaker on his lapel, and to shift all subsequent problems onto the Europeans.
Trump is acting according to his own logic, meaning Ukraine wants peace. It said yes. We stop at the line of demarcation. So that's it. Ukraine is ready to take the shortest and simplest path. Russia doesn't want that. So according to Trump's logic, pressure should be put on Russia. What happened in the form of these sanctions? At the same time, according to Trump's logic, if tomorrow the Russians say, okay, we're ready to negotiate a ceasefire, they will go to these negotiations and will be ready to lift sanctions and make some other concessions. He hopes that with the help of sanctions, he can get through to Putin's reason. He'll say, okay, we're losing, you're losing, let's look for ways to get out of this situation.
Trump, who thinks like a businessman, analysts say, didn't take into account the main thing, the logic of Putin. The dictator doesn't care about millions of Russians becoming impoverished or about economic stagnation. He has his own priorities, and he has no intention of changing them, neither under the pressure of a stick nor a carrot.
He lives for war, you see. The future Russian economy, oil prices, none of that bothers him at all. There will always be money for the front, for the army, for recruiting soldiers. The soldiers themselves will be found, because they've been found for 3 or 4 years already, and more will be found. That's all he thinks about, and he probably believes that everything is going just fine. As for what will happen later, when something eventually collapses, when people start living badly, when there's no gasoline or something else is missing, they'll find gasoline for the tanks, and everyone else will have to walk. That's basically his entire logic. He doesn't feel sorry for anyone, not just Ukrainians. He doesn't even feel sorry for Russians. So really, what is there to be surprised about?
So far, the only one to react to the demonstrative shift across the ocean has been the unpredictable Dmitry Medvedev, whom analysts say isn't worth paying attention to at all. On the contrary, not a single word has come from any official figures. And most likely, in Moscow, they'll pretend that everything is going according to plan.
Obviously, they don't have any kind of response yet. Medvedev plays the role of the bad cop and is rude to Trump, but as we've already seen this year, Putin and Trump don't insult each other. They are polite, they just tease each other a little. That's why I don't think Putin will make any radical statements, insult Trump, or say that we're now enemies. Well, he'll say something like, I got a bit carried away, let's talk, we'll work things out. I don't think we're in for anything like him coming out crying and saying, well, that's it, it's over for me, I renounce power, I lost the war, the new sanctions have crushed me.
Can Vladimir Putin roll everything back? And will Trump take the bait of empty promises and stalling for time? It's obvious to analysts that, unlike during the Anchorage meeting, the US president quickly realized that the desired outcome wasn't going to happen. But it seems the pendulum has swung. According to the media, India and China will be forced to give up. Russian black gold.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Moreover, President Vladimir Putin got hit from another side as well. Moscow was expecting support from its allies, but instead received what can only be described as a slap in the face, right in front of the entire world. The balance of power is shifting, and Beijing is now betting on itself, not on the increasingly isolated and doomed Russia. Tensions are rising, and now the Russian Federation is gradually turning into a kind of colony under the Celestial Empire. An unexpected turn. The balance of power is clearly shifting. The first details of Russia's public humiliation are coming very soon. China is Russia's main partner, helping it keep its struggling economy afloat and continue the ongoing war in Ukraine.
With President Vladimir Putin, in various forms for the mutual benefit and the sustained, dynamic and long-term development of Chinese-Russian relations.
But is that really the case? After all, at the same time, China denies selling weapons or components to Russia, and Chinese banks have stopped transactions with Russia due to sanctions.
We're talking about pairs, dozens, even tens of millions of Chinese soldiers. Right now, that's exactly what we need. And
why do you think so?
Why not?
Why? Do you really think soldiers should just...
I look at the Belgorod region and think how much we lack the Chinese army.
We often hear statements from China that China has never sold weapons to Russia, and that China stands for the territorial integrity of Ukraine and wants an end to the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Just 3 years ago, propagandists were rejoicing, saying, let Western companies leave, we'll buy everything from China.
Now we've bought a truly wonderful Chinese car, absolutely amazing. Many times more affordable than the cars we used to buy before. I bought myself 3 pairs of Gucci shoes, 2,000 rubles each. Wonderful. Probably made somewhere in China too. I hope here as well. Fake, of course. Now I buy them on principle, only fakes.
There's no need to even comment on how that turned out. That very Chinese support for the Russian economy resulted in the bankruptcy of Russian manufacturers.
Just look at what, for example, the soldiers are driving. What, Russian-made cars, right? You have to be a real patriot to drive a Patriot. Because it costs a fortune, breaks down all the time, and the spare parts are insanely expensive. That's why the guys drive Chinese cars. And now they need motorcycles. Russian ones? No. For some reason, yes, there are very few Russian ones. There aren't any Russian ones at all. That's the point, isn't it? No, Russian motorcycles don't exist. So what? I have no idea.
If you look at the Russian Federation from an economic perspective, they're simply being used as a basic sales market. As for everything that isn't related to the military industry, civilian engineering has basically, as they say, been reduced to zero. And
Russia has literally turned into a raw materials appendage for China. By the way, Foreign Minister Lavrov came up with a very apt metaphor, calling Putin Xi Jinping's donkey, Sergei Puchalenta Sendan.
As they say in the East, the guest is a donkey, the host. All the programs, of course, depend on those gracious proposals that the Chinese president and his team made to our president.
basically, from an economic standpoint, all China needs is cheap raw materials. Which, by the way, the Russian Federation has quite a lot of. It's not just oil and gas, which are essential for energy and transportation, but also lithium, important for batteries, timber, used in construction, valuable metals like copper and nickel, and in fact gold as well, valued for its rarity. Yes, in other words, all the things from which China then produces goods for the entire world.
And this situation manifests itself in completely different aspects. China has officially approved new geographic maps on which part of Russian territory Bolshoi-Ussuriysky Island is recognized as Chinese territory. In fact, the Chinese have already settled huge parts of Siberia and turned the territory into their own colonies.
The Chinese dragon is unlikely to stay within its borders simply because it, by the way, it actually has certain historical grounds for claiming a significant part of our Far East.
And that's a fact.
Of course, at first there was enthusiasm, but gradually it faded, and eventually we all realized that Asina had become a Chinese colony. It's simply a slave-owning enterprise. A slave-owning enterprise, or a prison, call it what you will, where they appoint overseers to keep the workers in check, because there is still resentment after all. And the workers in Asina even staged a protest called Asina is not China. And they also regularly threaten, saying that you won't be able to get a job anywhere in this city. Here's your black mark. So sit quietly and keep your mouth shut for your 15 to 30,000.
They are very good at waiting. And this ability to wait, it's also about the integration of the Chinese, among other things. On the territory of the Russian Federation, this in fact is essentially annexation. And what's more, if you pay attention on some Chinese maps, certain regions of the Russian Federation are already labeled with Chinese names. Well, listen, why would you need to declare war for that?
Russian television is already showing segments about how to find a Chinese husband. And in Russian schools and government institutions, Chinese is being actively studied.
It is divided into two camps. Those who want to study it, and those who are skeptical and say, why do we need Chinese? We're not planning to go anywhere. I answer them very simply, actually. I say, I'm not teaching you Chinese here, but using the Chinese language to make you think with your head. And that skill will always come in handy.
Putin constantly tries to characterize relations with China as a strong friendship, but China's Xi Jinping literally spat in Putin's face by taking away from Russia that very great victory. And
it was just yesterday, in fact, that my good friend and official representative of the People's Republic of China, the PRC, graciously treated me to a delicious meal of authentic Peking duck. Let me tell you, there were 2 pieces there, and I thought I'd only eat 1. You get what I mean, right? But I couldn't resist. I ate the second one too. You see, it was just too delicious.
China and Russia, as the main theaters of military operations during World War II, made a decisive contribution to the victory over fascism and thus laid the cornerstone for the post-war world order.
China and Russia are neither friends nor partners. And this is important. As soon as China has enough motivation to limit its cooperation with the Russian Federation, believe me, it will do so. In fact, Russia has no other choice. Either be friends with China now or face economic collapse. And as a consequence, political, military, and all other collapses at the same time.
So it turns out that China is not really helping Russia save its economy or win the war. They're simply taking advantage of its weakness to seize its resources and strengthen their influence in Asia. And
what do you think about Zelensky's upcoming meeting with Whitcoff? We look forward to your comments. Stay tuned for more important updates and don't forget to like the video. Wishing you peaceful skies above.